Welcome back to the deep dive. It's really great to have you sitting right here with us today.
Yeah, we've got a really tailored exploration lined up for you.
We do, and honestly, the subject matter today is pretty urgent.
Extremely urgent.
But before we get into the heavy lifting, I do want to start by sending a massive thank you to our sponsor, www.myprivacy.blog, for making this crucial exploration possible.
Absolutely.
Not only are they supporting this deep dive, but they actually provided some of the foundational real-time intelligence we're going to be unpacking over the next several minutes.
Which is incredibly fitting, given the landscape we are looking at today.
Right, because today's mission is an intense look at the dark evolution of digital exploitation. We are examining how bad actors manipulate our digital footprints, and we're looking at this from two completely different vectors.
Right, two very distinct threats.
Exactly. On one side of the spectrum, we have these decentralized, almost nihilistic networks that are actively targeting kids.
Inside their everyday video games.
Yes, right inside the everyday video games sitting in your living room. And then on the other side, we have centralized cult-like organizations exploiting young, ambitious influencers right out in the open in the bright lights of Los Angeles.
To map all of this out for you, we have a really fascinating stack of materials on the desk today. We're looking at official Europol data on an initiative called Project Compass.
Which is massive.
It is. It includes this highly detailed global operational map tracking recent international crackdowns. We also have comprehensive threat briefings on something called the COM, and specifically the 764 network.
And those were provided directly by the team at www.myprivacy.blog, right?
Correct. And finally, we'll be analyzing the investigative reports detailing the recent FBI raids involving the 7M TikTok dance group.
You know, navigating these exact kinds of modern digital threats is precisely why resources like www.myprivacy.blog are so vital. It's not just about theoretical privacy anymore.
No, not at all.
It is about practical physical safety for you and your family.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with the decentralized threat first. Looking at these threat briefings, law enforcement keeps referring to this massive ecosystem simply as the COM. What exactly are we looking at when we talk about that?
Right, so the COM, which is short for community, is what authorities classify as a massive transnational virtual network, or a TVN.
Great.
It is largely English-speaking. And what makes it so incredibly difficult to combat is that it's just so decentralized.
There's no head of the snake.
Exactly. There is no single boss or headquarters. Instead, it's structured into three main subgroups that operate almost like different branches of a highly chaotic criminal enterprise.
And these branches have very, very different operational goals.
They do. First, you have Cybercom. Their primary focus is the technical side network intrusions, deploying complex ransomware, targeting online commerce, that sort of infrastructure.
Right.
Then you have offline com, which essentially takes digital radicalization and pushes it out into the real world.
Like physical attacks. Yeah, they encourage physical property damage, orchestrate real-world harm to others, and even promote acts of terrorism.
Which is terrifying. But then there's the third branch, which, looking at the briefings from www.myprivacy.blog, is arguably the most disturbing evolution of this entire network.
Yeah, that is the sextortion com. This arm focuses almost exclusively on the extortion and exploitation of minors.
Wow.
They typically target kids and young adults right in that very vulnerable window between the ages of 11 and 25. The operators extort these young people to commit online and offline sex crimes.
God.
And beyond that, they actively promote self-harm, suicide, and extreme violence against people and animals. It is a completely toxic ecosystem.
That brings us to a very specific, highly dangerous offshoot of the COM known as 764.
Right.
This group is notorious within the broader network for its aggressive grooming tactics. And I was looking at the origin notes for 764 in the briefings, and it really stood out to me just how remarkably recent this all is. Who actually started this specific network?
That is honestly one of the wildest parts of this dossier. It started back in 2021 on a Discord server named CVLT.
Okay.
And it wasn't founded by some sophisticated cybercrime syndicate. It was founded by a 15-year-old school dropout from Texas.
A 15-year-old?
Yeah, named Bradley Chance Cadenhead, who went by the username Felix. He had been bullied, dropped out of school, and essentially learned how to groom and extort other minors just by observing these darker servers.
Wait, so this massive, terrifying global network that Europol is hunting down the name 764, is it some kind of dark web code?
No, it is literally just a piece of Cadenhead's partial zip code from Stephenville, Texas.
You're kidding.
No, it is almost pathetically mundane for the amount of global damage they're causing.
That is staggering. A teenager's zip code becomes the banner for an international extortion ring.
What's fascinating here is the underlying motive of this specific group, because when you study traditional cybercriminal networks, the motive is almost always financial.
Sure, they want money.
Right. They want to steal your credit card, drain your crypto wallet, or steal your identity to sell it. But 7064 is fundamentally different. They are driven by an ideology that the FBI has started classifying as nihilistic violent extremism.
Nihilistic violent extremism.
Yes. Their stated goal, according to counterterrorism investigators, isn't to get rich. Their goal is to sow chaos and ultimately bring down society.
They just want to break people for the sake of breaking them.
It goes beyond just chaos. It's about absolute power and control over another human being. And because that threat has escalated so rapidly, international law enforcement has had to completely restructure their approach.
Because they can't just follow the money.
Exactly. So in January of 2025, Europol launched Project Compass. It's an ongoing, massive global coalition coordinated by the European Counterterrorism Center. It involves dozens of countries, stretching from the US and the UK all the way to Australia and across mainland Europe.
And we actually have the operational map and the hard data right here on the desk from Project Compass. Seeing it visualized really puts the scale into perspective.
It really does.
According to Europol's recent results, this coalition has successfully safeguarded 4 victims and arrested 30 perpetrators so far. On top of that, they have identified or partially identified 62 victims and tracked down 179 perpetrators. This is a massive, highly coordinated dragnet.
It is a phenomenal effort.
Right.
But as that data clearly shows, it's an uphill battle. For every perpetrator they manage to put in handcuffs, there are dozens more they are just beginning to identify.
Right.
Because the network is so completely decentralized, taking down one server or arresting one key user just causes the rest of the network to splinter, rebrand, and pop up somewhere else. It is the ultimate game of whack-a-mole.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying for anyone listening who has a family.
Yeah.
If you think these predators are lurking deep on the dark web, requiring special encrypted browsers and secret passwords to find, you are dead wrong.
Completely wrong.
Their hunting grounds are the exact same bright, everyday platforms your kids are probably logged into right now. We are talking about Roblox, Minecraft, Discord, and X. They are operating right out in the open.
The grooming process they utilize on these mainstream platforms is highly systematic. It relies heavily on intense psychological manipulation, and it usually begins with a very calculated initial contact.
How does that usually look?
A predator will create a convincing fake persona, often pretending to be another teenager looking for a friend to game with. They might offer in-game virtual currency like Robux for Roblox just to get the conversation started.
Right.
Or they might use a tactic called love bombing, where they shower a vulnerable kid with affection, validation, and attention just to build a rapid baseline of trust.
And once that trust is established, the trap snaps shut. The escalation phase begins, and the pivot is incredibly fast.
Terrifyingly fast.
They coerce the victim, usually playing on that manufactured trust, into sending an explicit photo. And the moment the predator has that photo on their hard drive, the entire dynamic flips. It instantly becomes blackmail.
Right.
And because of that nihilistic ideology we discussed earlier, the demands they make aren't usually for gift cards or crypto. They demand horrific acts. They force victims to engage in self-harm, to physically carve the predator's screen name into their own skin, to harm their family pets, or even to participate in swatting attacks, where heavily armed police are falsely called to an innocent person's house.
All of this horror is ultimately monetized within their own twisted ecosystem through what they call lore books.
Take a second to explain what that actually means, because reading about it in the briefing was chilling.
A lore book is essentially a digital vault. These networks trade these vaults, which are filled with CSAM child sexual abuse material and extreme gore. This material acts as a literal currency within the 764 network.
It's just evil.
They trade it, archive it in highly encrypted vaults, and use the sheer volume of their collections to gain status, prove their loyalty, and recruit new members into the hierarchy.
So they are essentially using documented human suffering as a currency to buy social status in a chat room. That is horrifying, and the real-world consequences for the victims are just devastating.
They are.
The My Privacy blog briefings highlighted a case that really stuck with me. Up in the town of Vernon, Connecticut, an honor roll student was arrested for conspiring to direct bomb threats at her own community. You look at that on paper and wonder, why would a good student suddenly do this?
Exactly.
It turned out police discovered she was being ruthlessly coerced by an overseas 764 member who had gotten hold of sensitive photos of her. She was so terrified of her photos being exposed to her school, her friends, and her family that she felt calling in a bomb threat was her only way out.
The leverage they hold over these victims is absolute, and it overrides all rational decision-making. However, law enforcement is making significant strides globally. We've seen high-profile arrests by federal authorities recently that really prove the transnational reach of this network.
Like who?
For instance, authorities recently arrested 21-year-old Leonidas Faragianis over in Greece and 20-year-old President Nepal in North Carolina. They are actively pulling these operators out of the shadows all over the world.
Seeing the global reach of these arrests really drives home why resources like www.myprivacy.blog are so essential right now. You cannot simply wait for Europol to catch these guys. You have to fortify your own digital footprint to ensure your family never becomes a target in the first place.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's vital to recognize that digital exploitation doesn't always look like a faceless, decentralized network of nihilists hiding in a Roblox server.
Well, sometimes it looks completely different.
Exactly. Sometimes the threat mutates. Sometimes it is highly centralized, brightly lit, and operating right out in the open under the glamorous guise of Hollywood success.
We've been looking at these decentralized predators in the shadows, but the dossiers point out that exploitation has a completely different vector. Let's look at the situation involving the 7M TikTok dance group.
This is a huge case.
This is a story that has absolutely dominated social media algorithms and streaming platforms recently, and it escalated dramatically in July of 2025. The FBI, alongside local tactical teams, executed a massive early morning raid at 7744 McGroarty Street in Tujunga, California.
Right.
This compound is the home of Robert Israel Shin, the founder of both 7M Films and the Shekinah Church. The arrest warrants served during this raid were incredibly extensive. We are talking about severe allegations, sex trafficking, money laundering, mail fraud, tax evasion, and even COVID-19 pandemic fraud.
The mechanism of exploitation here, as alleged by former members, relies on a completely different kind of control than the brute force blackmail we saw with 764. 7M Films was founded in 2021, ostensibly as a talent management company.
Right, ostensibly.
The allegation is that Shin lured young, highly ambitious TikTok dancers to Los Angeles with the promise of viral fame, industry connections, and lucrative brand sponsorships. But once they were in his orbit, he effectively conscripted them into his religious organization, the Shekinah Church.
The level of financial and emotional control described by the former members in these reports is just staggering. Dancers alleged that Shin systematically forced them to physically and emotionally isolate themselves from their support networks.
Yeah.
He allegedly instructed them during sermons that they needed to die to their families to achieve spiritual purity. And on the financial side, former members claim that 7M and the church were taking up to 80% of their gross pay through various opaque fees, which included a mandatory 10% man of God fee that went directly into Shin's pockets.
The emotional core of this entire saga really burst into the public consciousness back in 2022, largely due to the Wilking family. Melanie Wilking and her parents took to Instagram Live for a heartbreaking 40-minute plea that went massively viral.
I remember that.
They claimed that Melanie's sister, Miranda Derrick, who was her lifelong dance partner and a huge TikTok star in her own right, had been completely isolated and manipulated by a religious organization that the family explicitly described as a cult.
Watching that video was incredibly raw. You have these parents and a sister essentially looking into a camera saying, "We have lost our daughter to this group. She has cut off all ties with us. She won't come to family funerals, and we are completely out of options." That Instagram Live is really what kicked off the intense public scrutiny, which eventually culminated in a major Netflix docuseries and ultimately these recent FBI raids.
It is a harrowing picture painted by those former members and concerned families, but we do have to look at the other side of the coin here, because this is an active and fiercely contested legal battle. To understand the full scope of the story objectively, we have to acknowledge that Miranda Derrick herself has continually and vehemently pushed back against all of these claims.
Right.
She has released multiple public statements explicitly denying that she is a hostage, a victim, or in any danger. She publicly called the Netflix docuseries one-sided, stating that her family is simply not religious and fundamentally misunderstood her personal choice to attend church.
Okay.
She maintains that she is completely free to practice her faith, manage her career, and live her life as she sees fit. Furthermore, Robert Shin didn't just deny the allegations. He filed a defamation and trade libel lawsuit against several former members back in 2022 for publicly referring to his organization as a cult.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've just looked at two radically different methods of digital manipulation. On one hand, you have decentralized predators hunting children in virtual gaming spaces using blackmail and fear. On the other, you have a centralized talent management company in Los Angeles facing federal charges for allegedly isolating and financially draining young adults through promises of fame and spiritual coercion. How do you protect yourself, your kids, and your family from these threats when the tactics are constantly evolving?
This raises an important question. Are we unwittingly handing these exact predators the ammunition they need to target us in the first place?
That's the real question.
To defend against this, we have to undergo a fundamental shift in how we view our digital privacy. The old mindset we all grew up with was, I have nothing to hide. I'm not a criminal, so it doesn't matter what I post.
Right.
But the new mindset has to be, what could a criminal do with this information? It is not about hiding dark secrets.
Yeah.
It is entirely about denying them leverage.
And the team at www.myprivacy.blog lays out some incredible actionable OPSEC, that's operational security strategies that families need to adopt right now. It's not just about installing an antivirus software, it's behavioral. If the old mindset was, I have nothing to hide, what's the practical shift here?
The first major shift is what the intelligence community calls financial silence. We all know not to post pictures of our credit cards. But it goes much deeper than that. You should never post about money, stock investments, crypto holdings, or honestly, any purchases over $100.
Really?
Yes. Criminals, especially those looking for targets within these broader comm networks, actively scan social media for humble brags. A post about a new car or a lavish family vacation isn't just an update for your friends to a predator. It is a flare going up, identifying a lucrative target for extortion.
Next is a concept the briefings call visual intelligence. I think people vastly underestimate how much data they leak in a single, innocent photograph. Think about the photos we post every day. You might think you're just posting a cute picture of your kid heading out to soccer practice.
Right.
But a predator isn't looking at the smile. They're looking at the school logo on the uniform, the street signs in the background, the home address reflected in the car window, and the invisible metadata attached to the file itself.
Exactly. You are essentially handing a predator a map to your life. You need to proactively strip location services from your camera apps so that metadata isn't embedded in the image.
Yeah.
And you have to actively scan the background of your images, zooming in on reflections and reading the room before they ever go online.
Then there is the concept of platform lockdown. On apps like Discord, which, as we discussed, is a massive hunting ground for the 764 network, you have to go into the settings and physically disable friend requests from strangers.
It's a must.
TikTok and Instagram accounts for minors must be set to private. But www.myprivacy.blog also talks about something incredibly smart called information compartmentalization.
Right, you have to build firewalls between your digital identities. You should never use the same username across all your gaming platforms and social media.
Because they just Google it.
Exactly. If a predator finds your child on a public Roblox server, you don't want them to be able to type that same username into Instagram and instantly find their real-life profile, their school friends, and their family members. That is how the leverage is built.
Alongside these preventative walls, you have to know how to spot the red flags that someone has breached your defenses. If a child suddenly becomes highly secretive about their devices angling screens away when you walk in the room, that's a warning.
Yep.
If they display an unexplained sophisticated knowledge of cryptocurrency, or if you spot new encrypted messaging apps on their phone that they can't explain, those are massive red flags that a conversation needs to happen immediately.
And one of the most chilling red flags the sources mentioned, specifically regarding the 764 network, is a physical manifestation of this digital threat. If your child is wearing long sleeves or heavy sweatshirts on unusually hot days, that can be a sign that they are trying to hide coerced self-harm. That is how dark and how real this digital manipulation can get. It requires a level of active vigilance from parents that simply wasn't necessary a decade ago. You are not just monitoring screen time anymore, you are actively conducting threat assessments in your own living room.
Let's briefly recap the intense ground we've covered on this deep dive. We started by looking at Europol's global fight against the COM and the deeply disturbing 764 network, unpacking how decentralized predators weaponize platforms like Roblox and Discord to groom, extort, and break minors using nihilistic terror.
Yeah.
We then shifted to the physical world, detailing the explosive FBI raids on the 7M TikTok dance group and exploring the complex allegations of centralized, cult-like exploitation playing out in Los Angeles. And finally, we walked through the vital OPSEC strategies, maintaining financial silence, practicing visual intelligence, and locking down platforms needed to fortify your home against these evolving threats.
Absolutely vital.
I want to give one final huge thank you to www.myprivacy.blog. Sponsoring this deep dive and providing this level of crucial real-world intelligence is exactly what empowers you and your family to stay safe in a digital landscape that can feel incredibly overwhelming.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've explored today.
Oh.
We've talked extensively about how these bad actors use the internet to isolate victims from their physical families and their physical communities. But as the digital and physical worlds continue to merge, particularly with the rapid rise of augmented and virtual reality hardware, we have to ask a difficult question. Will the concept of a safe physical space even exist for the next generation? Or will our living rooms simply become immersive, 3D extensions of the very networks we are trying so desperately to protect our children from?
That is a profound and deeply unsettling question to take with you. Thank you so much for sitting down and joining us on this deep dive. It is a heavy topic, but an absolutely necessary one to confront. We want to encourage you to stay safe out there, stay curious, and please take 10 minutes to go audit your family's digital footprint today. We'll see you next time.